Blood Prince Council is the first fight in the Blood Wing. There's of the two fights that are there. On normal, the fight is hectic to say the least. It involves three bosses: Prince Valinar, Prince Talron, and Prince Kelseth. Traditionally, you would have a Death Knight tank Kelseth because of the spell damage that he'll do, and you'll have your Pally tank or Bear tank in some cases tank Valinar and Talron together. Valinar is active first always, or at least always has been on every other server. And when he activates, he has one major ability. His empowered ability is a giant knockback that does damage to anyone that's within 10 yards of another player. Slash range 10 is your best friend. Melee, this is the fight that really rapes you. As for your casters, you can be spread out around the outer edges. Healers should be in the middle. Hunters, warlocks, unholy death knights, your pets should be put on the kinetic bombs. They'll be assigned to you in an order so that it's never an issue. Going through the first phase after the knockback and the transition from Valinar to either Taldaram or Kelseth, we'll start with Taldaram. Taldaram does an ability called, that's a flame orb. That's his major empowerment. Fire Aura Mastery can be a real benefit to this phase. If the player that it targets is within closer range than if you're further away. The further the player is and the more people that intercept damage, traditionally will lower the amount of damage it does. During this phase, while Valinar is not the active empowered boss, he will still continue to create spells that are swirlies on the ground. They're white, they're sometimes hard to see, but if you're within a certain range of them, they'll knock you around the room. Assuming that Valinar and Taldaram have had their turns as empowered, they'll move to Kelseth. The tank for Kelseth will spend the entire first two boss phases picking up dark nuclei, which reduce the shadow damage taken by that tank. Ideally, they have anywhere between 4 to 6 dark nuclei on them at any time. If they have that many, it's not going to be an issue. No cleave is acceptable on this boss whatsoever, or you will kill the dark nuclei. Sometimes in progression strats, they will have the raid, not even DPS, on Kelseth, because the fight's an attrition fight, not a speed fight. The difference between normal and heroic for Blood Prince Council comes into play with movement. A fight that's traditionally very movement-based then becomes calculated. As you move your character, and it's based on a timer, not on distance, the amount of time you spend moving, you get a stacking debuff called Shadow Prison. Ideally, you don't go over 6 stacks of this because it increases the amount of damage you take from all spell damages, so meaning any of the boss's main mechanics. If you have to move to prevent yourself from dying, it's more important to move than it is to take the increase or take the damage and potentially die. However, proper positioning and proper planning of movement can eliminate massive amounts of damage on this fight and should be established early and maintained at a regular basis. The final boss of the Bloodwing is Blood Queen Lanethel. One of the easiest fights, but also one of the most punishing if a mistake is made. The tanks will stack on top of each other, generally on the stage, where she's standing when you enter the room. And one tank will tank her, the other one will be just a damage sponge. They share the damage with that tank, and that's their whole job. The first major ability that we'll talk about is the Vampiric Bite. Blood Queen Lanethel normally targets the first highest DPS in threat, and will run out and bite them. They will become empowered and do increased amount of damage as well as self-heal the whole time. Ideally, you have one of your highest bursting DPS be bitten first, and then they start spreading the bite as the timer counts down. Failing to spread the bite will drive that person insane. They will become mind controlled and have to be killed. They cannot be battle resed. If they are battle resed, they'll be battle resed as mind controlled. The second ability comes out is Invoking Shadows, which is similar to the fire on Jiraxis. Instead of green, it's purple, but you do the same thing, run it out to the wall, and along the wall is the most common strategy. Rogues can cloak this, Death Knights can AMS this, but if you cannot perfectly time that, make sure to step out of the group before you try to do it, so you don't kill the entire melee stack. The final main ability that we'll see during the normal phases of the fight is a soul link between 3 targets. Those 3 targets generally come to meet each other right behind the melee pile, because normally it'll be 2 ranged in a melee. Not always, but it's a fairly common guesstimation. It's easy to mark the spot with a flare or something and have everyone meet in that location so that there's no question where they're going. The final ability that she will do is an aerial ability. She will run to the middle of the room, fear the entire raid, and do Blood Bolt roll across the raid. Immunities are great for this part so that healers don't have to try to heal everybody. Some of the more big brain strats besides using Tremor Totems is to have priests, like during one air phase, have one of our priests or 2 of our priests fear ward themselves and immediately cast Mass Dispel as the fear goes out. If you have 2 to 4 priests in the raid, or even 3 or whatever, you can plan this so that the majority of the raid gets cleared very quickly. As the fight goes on, you will spread the Vampiric Bite. So 1 goes to 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and 8 will become 16. By that point, the raid will be at the Berserk timer. If it takes that long, plans are important. Ideally, you have a tree of what order of people that you want bitten. Last thing you want bitten are your healers, and never bite the tanks because it prevents all threat generation. And that's the entirety of that fight. It is punishing when you stand in bad mechanics. It is punishing if we do not plan for the fears, and it is punishing if people do not have their extra action bars properly set up with whatever UI they're using, so that they can do the bite. The bite is always bound to the number 1 key unless you change it, and will take over your action bar when you become sated and need to bite. Traditionally, you would use Bloodlust in this once you have 8 people bitten, so that you get the maximum damage out of it. Trying to do it at 16 people bitten might be cutting it too close to the enrage.